Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Grants and Contracts podcast. I'm your co host, Lainey.
And this is Abraham. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Grants and Contracting Podcast. If you are joining us live, remember you are one contract away. And so by hanging out with us, you get a chance to continue to grow your grants, your contracts in the contracting and in the foundational world of the grant world itself. So if you're joining us live, make sure that you leave a comment where you're joining us from and the name of your organization. That will be awesome.
Yes, and we love to see where everyone's joining us from. So, sometimes we have people from all over the world. So, I'm excited to see today where some of our listeners will be from. If you're watching on playback, still leave a comment. We always love to see playback comments. And if you are watching on playback or YouTube, always give us a like and follow. That kind of just helps us keep doing what we're doing and helps us to reach a larger audience. So, Abe, today everybody's seen the title, but we are going to be talking about, I feel like, some we've talked about it before. So now we're just kind of giving an update, but it is the trigger words of 2025. And that is, what is Trump doing? The Trump admin. That is just what everybody has talked about since Inauguration Day. So I'm excited to dive in. Give us a little hint about some of the things we're going to be discussing over the next hour.
Well, we talked about, we used to talk about the Oprah effect, right? But in the world of government contracting, we're going to talk about the Trump effect. And Donald Trump, his new administration has brought a lot of changes, both positive and, not so positive. And so today we're going to be talking about all the different changes, a recap of what's happened in the last 7 months because we're in month 8 now under the Trump administration. And so we're going to be talking about what's happened and how some of these changes can impact your company, your organization as a small organization, whether you're nonprofit, for-profit. All of these changes here will have a direct impact on your organization. So we've got some very key things that we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about changes with the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. We're going to be talking about the changes as it relates to subcontracting rules, the 8A audits, a summary of all the different things that's happened in the last 7-8 months. So stay tuned as we dive into these topics here.
Yeah, and as always, I think that there's a little bit of fear that comes with this. I hope that since we're 7, 8 months in, we're getting over that, but there's always change, and with change comes fear. We want to instill that every admin has changes. So, this is not something that's new with the changes, but that the greatest thing you can do for your business and your company is be informed and then to pivot to those changes. And we're actually going to be talking about that a little bit, about some of those pivots you can do to be successful in this new government market, in this new admin, because we do have this for the next 3.5 years that we will be in this administration.
And I've been in the industry. Some of you guys have been in the industry for a while. Some of you are fairly new in the government market. So I would say never let whatever you hear on the news control what you do. The media is, a lot of it is propaganda. And, whether you're, leaning left, right, in the middle, doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or neither, or none of the above. Government contracting is about not red or blue, as we always say. It's about green, right? It's about the money. So every administration comes in, you have to adjust to that administration to access the opportunities during those 4 years where the administration is pushing out their agenda, their policies, and their propaganda. So navigate through all the noises, the distraction, and grow and thrive in every administration. So that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. So if you're joining us, leave a comment of your organization and where you're joining us from. That helps us a little bit in this here. And if you're watching this a replay, like and subscribe, and click on the notification bell before so that you can get all the alerts every time we do a live podcast here.
Yeah, and we had a question in the chat, and so I want to go ahead and answer it. They asked, "Will there be anything presented on DoD contracts?" Yes, we're talking about some FAR regulations that have happened with DoD, and so that will be a little bit later in the podcast. So hang around. If anybody has any other questions, be sure to drop them as we're talking about anything. And I always try to keep up with the chat and just answer those as soon as I can kind of put it into the information that we're sharing. So yeah, Abe, let's dive in.
All right, so let's talk about the Trump effect as it relates to grants and contracts in our world that we live in here. So while we go and talk a little bit about, before we go into the specific item, just what's your general sense, Lainey? I'll share my general sense also in terms of what I've seen and some general thoughts first, and then we'll go into some specifics here. So my general thought starting off is this here. The every administration has its pros and cons. And so I
Mhm.
think under the Trump administration, the major impact has been on the a lot of the contract termination and termination for convenience on behalf of the government. Some of you as small businesses, you've experienced that yourself where your contracts have been terminated. So I think that that has had a big major impact. We'll go into some specifics on that in a little bit as well. And so I think overall, the Trump administration has hurt small businesses from the contract termination, but also some general sense. I think the Trump administration will help small businesses in the sense of simplifying the regulations. So we're going to dive into that, the specific of that as well. So I think, neither good or bad, and both good and bad at the same time. So from my general sense, what's your feeling, Lainey, as relates to the new administration?
Yeah, so I've it's been a big learning curve or just figuring it out because I know you've seen multiple administration changes, and I'm interested if this is like the one with the biggest changes, if you feel that way. But with me kind of being in the last administration change, I was in it, but not like studying it the way I am, having to explain it to people, that kind of stuff. So I wasn't keeping it as involved. But I agree with you. I think that there's both pros and cons. I do come from the federal funding side and the grant side, and I've just seen that already hurt a lot of, nonprofits with stuff that's happening, so the simplification of stuff, but also the mass cuts because sometimes, once again, on the news, you read all these crazy headlines and stuff that Doge did, and that's not necessarily what's happening on maybe that happened one time, but that's not really what an organization is doing or an agency is doing. And so I've got to see the real effects of that with the organizations I work with. And it's honestly been very disheartening to hear that certain things are getting cut and certain changes are being made that ultimately could close organizations that are doing amazing work for their community down. So that has been tough kind of dealing with all of that, but I do agree that some of these things, especially the stuff we're talking about today, I think it's going to be really good for small businesses. I think it's also going to be good for people that are coming in newer in the government space because as someone who's on the newer side of government contracting, it's a lot to learn and it's a lot to digest. And so with that, being able to read stuff and just know what it says when you first read it and not have to define 70 words, that does help you coming into the government contracting space. So I'm excited for this to kind of the new FAR to be released and just see it and see if they really do a great job at the simplification of stuff.
Yeah, and I do want to share some great news. What I've seen as a whole in the government contracting world, from the members of our community, the GovCon community, as well members of the association. Some of the members, they are getting contracts right now. Yes, we've gone through the cuts, right? I believe that all of the major cuts through Doge and through DI initiatives and other different things, all of that is more so behind us. There are going to be some more minor changes, cuts here and there, as the administration continue to adjust to their policies and their agendas. But the great news is this here. Um, One company in the construction world, they received 4 contracts in the last month and a half.
Wow.
So that's really good news. One of them, 2 of them were sole source contracts, which is awesome. And then two of them were bids that they submitted about 7, 8 months ago that have been being held back, and then now they're being released. So those are some good news. Other small business that we're working with, they're starting to get some contracts being released to them. So it is contracting season, and opportunities are being awarded, and companies are receiving that. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the first topic in terms of the major sweeping overhaul of the FAR. And the goal is to continue to make changes to the FAR. And so, what are your initial thoughts on this, Elaine, as it relates to the executive order to restore common sense to federal procurement?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting. They are saying that this could be completed as early as fall 2026. We are Pumpkin spice is starting to be seen on menus, so I would consider us right into fall 2026. So they don't have much time. We are going to share a link and I'll go ahead and put it in the chat, and it's the current overhauls they've already done. So that's interesting to kind of see which ones have already been edited. Something that I'm really interested about with this FAR overhaul is called the sunset provisions. So what this idea of sunset provisions is that new the new policy mandated is that if a FAR provision is required by statute or deemed if it is if it sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. Unless it is required by statute or deemed essential, it will expire within 4 years unless it's renewed. So I think that's going to be interesting too with it's always going to be changing. And I know it always is updated and changing, but I mean 4 years, so you could have a piece of the FAR that you've been very familiar with, and then if somebody doesn't renew it or doesn't see it as essential, it could no longer be a part of the FAR. And I would say that once that starts happening, we'll be getting, notifications on that. You can kind of come to this where it's talking about this FAR overhaul. But that's something that I find really interesting about part of this executive order is that sunset provision.
Hmm. Yeah, the FAR is over 2,000 pages, and some of you, you love the FAR, you use it to your advantage, and some of you have never really looked at the FAR. But 2,000 pages, even contracting officers who are required to know the FAR, uh, in my 17 years of doing government contracting, I've read through most of the FAR, but I know less than 5 people that I have met that have read through all of the FAR. Now,
Wow.
I know that there's many other people that have read through it, but I'm just talking about in my years of working with contracting officers, small business specialists, 16,000 companies that have gone through our training and our classes. I've only met 5 people that have read through the FAR. So it's not a lot of
So
people.
I have a fun idea. How many points would you get? So we have a CCM class which teaches us about all of contracting and everything like that. It's a 12-week course, and we work on a point basis to find our valedictorian. How many points would someone get for completely reading through the FAR?
We should probably give them 1,000 points just for reading through all the FAR because we give out bonus points during class time. So
Maybe 2,000 since it's 2,000 pages.
yeah,
When
yeah,
they're big.
yeah, that might be good. So this here is these are all the different parts. There's 53 parts of the FAR, and so these are all the parts that have gone through changes. Some of them are positive, some of them are not that positive. But these are some of the changes. So you can see Part One have to receive 30, updates to it already. There's additional changes to Part Two, and so forth. But there's two main parts in here that have not been touched yet. And this can be positive or this can be, potential very risky in the coming days or coming months. Part 19. Now, if you know what Part 19 is about, put in the chat. Let us know that, what is FAR Part 19 about. And then if we go down to FAR Part 44, it has not been touched yet. And so the two key main parts of the FAR that relates to most of you, which are small businesses. Now, if you're a large company, it does impact you to some degree as well. But the parts that has the greatest impact on small businesses have not been touched yet or have not been overhauled. And so put in the chat if you know what Part 19 and Part 44 is about.
So I actually think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Abe, but Mbika, she was one of our CCM students, correct?
Hmm. Yep.
Yep, she answered that part 19 is for small businesses. So 1,000 points for you if you were still in the class, but she has since graduated. But great job. Yeah, they're both about small businesses, and kind of the small business set-asides, all of that, but this is good news that this has not been edited yet. It could be coming to be edited, but it has not yet, which is great news for all of you that are small businesses.
Yeah, and Part 19 talks about the set aside program, talks about women, small business
Mhm.
certification, the EDWP, the WSB, the STVSB, the Hub Zone program, the 8A program. So Part 19 is critical as it talks about set asides and sole source contracts to certify small businesses. And then Part 44, which again have not been touched, talks about subcontracting guidance for contracting officers. When a large company wins a contract over 750,000, or if it's construction related, it's 1 million, and that threshold is going up. And so when a large company wins a contract, they are required to subcontract generally 35% to small businesses. And so that has not been touched yet. But with that said, what's happening to the 8A program right now? For some of you who are 8A certified businesses, some major things happening to the 8A program as is being what audited right now. So
Mhm.
the Trump administration, under the Trump effect, right, is they're doing an audit under the 8A program, the SBA, and the a sub agency of the SBA. They're looking to the 8A program, potentially looking for fraud, looking for
Yeah.
different things that has happened that under the 8A program. There's under USAID over 500 million, if I remember correctly. There's been identification of different fraud over the last few years, tied specifically to a few 8A company. And so now they're doing a major audit of the whole 8A program. And so what will come out of that, of those audits, the recommendation will come from that. My gut feeling is that there's going to be some um, changes to the 8A program that will further hinder 8A companies from accessing more contracting opportunities. That's my own personal opinion on that. If I'm reading the tea leaves, if I'm looking into what potentially can happen, that's my gut feeling. I hope that doesn't happen. But I
Mhm.
think after the audit, there's going to be more changes to the 8A program. With that said, though, I do believe that the Ultima court case that happened a year and a half ago saved the 8A program. Because before, with the presumption of social disadvantage, meaning that if you are of certain, background, there was a presumption that you were automatically qualifying to the 8A program. But by through the ultimate court case, it anyone can qualify into the 8A program. No longer it's a presumption of social disadvantage. That saved the 8A program. So I don't think the 8A program is going to be eliminated after the audit. I think there will be some changes, and maybe some changes will be positive, and some changes will hurt the existing 8A companies. I believe that there will be major changes after the audit, but I think the 8A program will not be eliminated because of the Ultima and is no longer a presumption of social disadvantage, specifically minority-owned businesses. Uh, I've
Yeah.
seen where any woman, we've helped a white female get into the aided program. There's different individuals who have different disability have gotten to the aided program. So there's under different bias, under different market restrictions, it's open to all individuals who qualify into the aided program now. So because of that, I don't think it's going anywhere. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's some changes that's happening, and so we'll have to do another podcast with all the changes after the 8A audit.
And it's really frustrating too with these programs. I mean, like I'm WSB certified, and so with that WSB, it used to not be as hard of a program to get into, and it's still very doable, but it's because people abuse programs. So then when they're audited and stuff comes out, then it makes it harder for other individuals that truly are an 8A program or truly are a woman-owned small business, and it's not somebody that's trying to fake a woman-owned small business to get a certification. So that's very frustrating. But I still think there's a lot of opportunities moving forward, and I still think there's a lot of positivity moving forward. So even though we talk about these changes, I still think that, and we're going to dive into some of those of like why how this is positive for small businesses. um so with the before we move on from the sweeping overhaul, with the, this idea of using the plain language and, the non-regulatory laws, I think it is gonna make it easier for small business not only to understand, but it's also gonna make it easier for them to put the FAR into use when they are applying for a contract or they're doing things for somebody that hasn't studied it as intensively as maybe Abe has studied it and understands it, maybe someone that's new coming in. Um, I think also this is we preach on this a lot, but why it's so important to be staying up to date on current events. And we're not saying, you have to watch every single thing on the news, but for example, we put in the chat the acquisition.gov that has the FAR overhaul. Keep up to date with that, randomly go on it. Maybe put some Google alerts on certain things that apply to your company that you get an email if an article is posted about that. I think those are the good current events that we're talking about keeping up with. We're not talking about that you got to have the news on 24/7 listening to what's going on, but specific things that apply to your business and government contracting. Oh, yes. And I almost forgot a huge um, resource that we've created is the GovCon community, but we have a news summary. So we have um centralized news for government contracting. So it kind of is a whole accumulation. It's updated daily. And these articles that we're talking about, they're coming straight from our news summary that our expert in current events kind of was able to forward to us for this podcast. But it's a great way to look at it. And we also have a search feature. So if you're looking for something specific, specifically if you are looking for FAR, you're going to be able to search that and it'll come up um, in the GovCon community.
Yeah, and the link is in the chat, so in the comments area. So if you click on that, it's it's free access to go. And so
Mhm.
instead of you searching and spending time trying to see what's important to you as a contractor or a nonprofit in the government space, this is already aggregated what's relevant to
Yeah.
our industry. So all you have to do is just come here and look through different topics to see which one makes sense to you to dive deeper in. So use this resources to help you. We spent a lot of time curating all this content and then we summarize it. So if you click on this here, there is a summary of what the topic is about. And then there, if you want to read the full article, you click on this here and then it takes you to the full article so that you can quickly get the snippet of it. And if it makes sense to read through all the details, then click on it and it will take you to that there. So staying relevant is important in the government market. But let's continue to talk about some of the changes with the FAR. So with some of the changes, one, what I like about it is that they're going to use everyday language, meaning that you as a small business, you can actually start to understand what the world this is all about, right? Because sometimes using governese or using acquisition terminology and acronyms and all these different words, it confuses you as a organization leader in your own company and in the different groups that you support. This makes it easier for you to understand. So I think that's one of the positive things that's going to come out of here. The other item is they're going to use what's called an agile approach. And some of you who are in technology, you understand agile methodologies and agile principles, meaning that it's going to be an iterative approach to it. And there will be different phases as it happens. There, if it's working, if it's positive, those things will be continued to be adopted. If it's not working, if it needs to be removed, it's going to be removed. So the FAR will be easier for all of us to understand. It will be there will be instead of 2,000 pages, it's going to get condensed.
Yeah.
And this falls under one of the Trump administration goals, which is for every new regulation that's introduced, 10 have to be removed. I love that concept there. And I concept that, because there's a lot of old statutory, a lot of old rules and regulations that just been sitting around for, you know, decades and decades and decades. It doesn't pertain to us anymore. Uh, but if it doesn't pertain to us, based upon the new regulation, it's going to get sunset after 4 years. So if it's still on
Mhm.
the books after 4 years, and if it's not being used anymore, is going to the FAR Council that reviews all of this. They say, you know what, this doesn't apply anymore. We're going to remove it. So that's good stuff there.
Yeah, which that's a very tedious and big job to have is, "Oh, you wanna put this new one in? Okay, fine, find some that don't fit anymore," that's a see, I feel like it's easy to put a new one in, it's hard to take those ones out because they do affect things, so that's crazy.
Yeah, so I think as it relates to the FAR, my general summary of this here is that it's going to be better for small businesses and nonprofit organizations that are doing grants and contracts. It's going to help you because there's going to be less to review, less pages. It's going to be done in everyday language, the vernacular versus governese terminology. And so I think overall it's going to be good for business as a whole.
I agree. I agree with that, and I'm excited to see the changes that we'll see. And we'll, as always, this is why it's great to follow along with what we do because we always are doing these updates. So when we feel like we have enough stuff to talk about, we do another update, and so you can kind of stay with the current events and with GovCon community too, staying with the current events. So hey, let's dive a little bit. I know we have some listeners that are want that they're waiting on this. Um, into the modernization of defense acquisitions.
Hmm.
So the executive order is called Modernizing Defense Acquisitions and Spurring Innovation in the Defense Industrial Base. So, what are some of your thoughts on this? It's the whole idea to modernize procurement practices. So kind of the same thing as what they're doing with the FAR. This just has specifically to do with the DoD.
First, let me define defense industrial base. And
Yeah.
DoD, so over 2024, the total budget or contract awards to businesses was about $755 billion. Of that, about 55, 60% of that was tied to DoD. About $400 billion was tied back to DoD. So practically, that means that if you are any organization in the government market, at some point you're going to do work with the DoD because they're just so big, so massive that you have to deal with DoD. So defense industrial base or DIB just means that you're one of the business or organization that does work for the Department of Defense. And within DoD, you get all the different major sub agencies, whether it's Army, Air Force, Marines, or the new Space Force. All of these different organization is important to you, and so defense industrial base. There's about 300,000 that are registered in SAM. Now, the total number of businesses that's registered in SAM is about 600,000. Uh, if you take out contracting officers and government agencies and so forth, it's really about 550,000 total that are business related. And of that, about 300,000 of them are doing work for DoD. So from a big picture perspective, that's really what we're talking about. Many of you are already DoD contractors, so you're already part of the defense industrial base. Lots of changes there with CMMC, with other different things, but we're not going to cover CMMC today. That's another podcast that we're going to be doing to really dive deeper into CMMC, which is going
In
to be
2
Monday
weeks.
in 2 weeks.
So we'll be looking out for that. It'll be posted this week and then we'll always mention it next week too. But yeah, that so if you're interested in the CMMC, 2 weeks, we're having a special guest on.
Yeah, so there's been some major cuts, through the Doge and so forth, tied back to DoD. But under the most almost every Republican administration, DoD spending has gone up, and I believe it's true under the Trump administration. The overall budget will continue to increase for DoD, so that's positive news. But some of the changes will continue to happen. And so, Lainey, what are some of the key changes that's happening under this modernizing the defense acquisition?
Yes. So one of the changes is that they're calling for a reform focused on efficiency, innovation, and reducing waste or delays. And they're also seeking to better align the procurement with modern needs and evolving threats. And so I think this is interesting because I had told Abe, I wish I would have saved this. A while ago when everybody was up in the air that we were going to go into World War III again, I had read an article and I had watched some videos about that. Once as America, we had a big stockpile of war materials, whether if it was ammunition and that kind of stuff. And now, whether if we've used it, if we've, given it away to other countries, we don't have that stockpile anymore. So I think this is interesting of this idea of they're wanting to modernize stuff, but then also wanting to use, and I think this is also in another FAR that we're going to talk about in a minute. They kind of go hand in hand, but wanting to use products that already on market, so not putting out procurement for products that are like one of one that take years to create and cost all this money, but instead having the innovative ideas for commercial products. So I think that's an interesting idea moving in with the DoD.
Yeah, there's two sides to the DoD, right? There is this the war or product or services that's related to military purposes. And when we, previously when we said that we're helping Ukraine with $10 billion in funding. Now, maybe 2 billion might be monetary support, but of that 10 billion, 8 billion of that is our older war related equipment. So for example, we're sending certain type of tanks, certain type of drones, certain type of arsenal, whether it is missiles or defense satellite systems. So we're sending billions of dollars of equipment over there, but we're also awarding new contracts. We're depleting our old stockpile that's 20 years technology or 30 years technology or 10-year technology. And so, yes, we're depleting our stockpile, but then at the same time, we're building new stockpile. And for most of you, some of you are anti-war, some of you are doesn't believe in that, supporting the war theater or the or militarization of different, the DoD itself, some of their goals and agenda, and so that's not necessarily you. But then, as it relates to DoD, there's also the
Uh-huh.
traditional acquisition opportunities for example, IT technology, right? So there are some major changes that's happening as it relates to IT infrastructure and technology infrastructure. That's going to be major opportunities for you. Now, if you're not in IT, there's still other opportunities for
Yeah.
you in the DoD world. DoD, just to kind of give you a general thought, the Department of Defense as a whole has about 550,000 facilities worldwide.
Mhm.
What does
And
that mean?
you have to think those facilities, they need janitors, they need or janitorial services, facilities management services, landscaping. A lot of the ones, if you're thinking, they need food because they're feeding the military. The DoD, we said the government buys anything, but so does the DoD. They need everything. And the DoD, I don't know if y'all those of you that have been long time listeners, one of our very first episodes, we talked to a lady and her first contract she ever got was babysitting. And it was through the DoD. She was babysitting for it was childcare for an entire thing that happened, but still that was DOD. So I mean, I think that we forget, and even me, like I hear DOD, Department of Defense, and I forget how extensive that can be and what that looks like on the facility side, on the personnel side, all of that, the training. I mean, we have somebody on our staff at GCA who he's done training with military and DoD on not we're not talking about defense training, we're talking about maybe it's manager training or leadership training or it can be anything.
Yeah, they buy everything just like every other organization. It's just, they just have a mission about defense, right? The name of the organization is called Department of Defense. So defense is number one priority. Now, offense, part of a good defense is also understand that you must have an offense. So defense is for security purposes, and offense is part of it is for national security as well. So all of that is needed. Now, let's talk practically because a lot of the focus is around technology. The war that we are fighting now is not necessarily through missile or what we deem as our enemy states, right? Whether it's Iran, whether it's North Korea, or whether it's our pseudo friend but kind of enemy, or more of our competitor, which is China. Russia, we kind of deem them as an enemy state to some degree. And so we have different national actors out there that from a government DoD perspective, they are a potential threat to us. The biggest threat is no longer missile. The biggest threat is technology as it relates back to IT. And IT specifically is around AI. And so the world is changing so fast around AI. Every day, a new AI use case is happening. The threat of using AI to infiltrate, to impersonate, to
Yeah.
put out misinformation, all of that is real. And so with this shifting landscape, uh, if you have or if you have a partner that is in that's in the technology world, whether it's hardware or software related, it's essential for you in the DoD marketplace right now.
Yeah, so it was really interesting when the whole situation was going on and everybody was up in the air of are we going to World War III? Are we going to World War III? I had talked to somebody who he's active in military, but it was just interesting. We were just going back and forth, talking about it. And he was saying that he believes that we're already in a World War III, but we'll never have a World War III. Like when we think about World War II, where you're sending tanks in and all of that, that it's technology, it's people hacking people, it's, that whole thing. And then we saw the missile situation unfold, but he was big on the technology because a lot of that stuff, us as civilians, we're not seeing that. And I think that's for the better because I don't want to handle that information. That's for someone way higher up than me to handle massive hacking and that kind of stuff. But he was explaining like we're already in a World War III. We've been in a World War III. It just looks different than World War One and World War II.
Yeah, and anytime if you don't believe that, you may be living under a rock. We are probably the biggest, whether it's economic threat or influence changes in terms of who has the most influence in the world. We as a nation, as Americans, we have taken more into a protecting mindset, whereas China's influence is continuing to grow worldwide. And this is usually what happens when the shift of world power happens, is when a nation expands its footprint nationwide, and the incumbent, which is the United States, have been the greatest influence around the world. We start to protect what we're doing and start to shift. And so the sign of a shift in who is becoming more of a world power is when the current world power tries to protect what they have, and the new world power continues to expand the footprint. So practically, as an example, we shut down USAID, right? Which is a to do good around the world. We have this agency, USAID, to do good around the world. With that, there you continue to have your positive influence around the world, where we shut down USAID. And these are my just own personal opinion of based upon my experiences, what I've seen, and not necessarily based on anything that is. I'm not pointing to a specific scientific or research, but more so from what I've seen as a whole. So when a nation becomes more protectorate of what they have, that means they're losing power. When a nation continues to expand their footprint, that means they're gaining more influence, gaining more power around the world. So I think given where we're at, those are the signs that I'm seeing. Um, but DoD is still the largest. Now, another agency that we cannot ignore is Homeland Security. Homeland Security has increased their budget, and about 2 months ago, we talked about all the budget that's increasing. Right, Homeland Security (DoD) is the one of the greatest increase in terms of the budget. Homeland Security is the other agency that we're seeing increase in terms of budget. So pay attention to Homeland Security, such as Border Patrol, right, or U.S. Coast Guard. Certain agencies continue to have their budget increase. Some civilian agencies are seeing the budget decrease, but it's always evolving, and so adjust as the market adjusts.
Yep, I agree. That's the biggest thing is that as change comes, change with it. So let's head in where we don't have that much long left. And I know we have a couple more things we want to talk about. So let's talk about this one. It's the executive order of ensuring commercial and cost effective solutions in federal contracts. So the biggest thing about this is what I kind of had mentioned this that it encouraged agencies to prioritize ready-made market-tested solutions to drive savings and innovation, and it's looking to reduce custom like government unique requirements. That way that timelines and projects are able to be accelerated versus where we're waiting around 3 years or even longer, 10 years to have something built.
What I've seen over the years is it takes a long time for the government to purchase something. Like, for example, if you're going to purchase, it takes you, let's assume the government wants to buy a certain AI technology, and it takes them 3 months or 6 months to acquire that. Well, that's like light years. If you're purchasing something today, but you don't finish the acquisition until 6 months from now, AI have evolved so much in 6 months, and or whether it's that or certain technology or software, 6 months is a long time, and so the government recognizes that, right? So they want to be able to access current market technology in a faster way, whether it's new innovation, new emerging tech, whether it's quantum computing, AI related, or certain type of hardware that's being created. The long procurement cycle where there has to be a need that has to be established. Then there has to be appropriation from Congress. Then there has to be a market survey. Then it has to be a solicitation that comes out, and then proposal has to be reviewed, and finally 6 months later it's awarded to somebody. That does not allow us to move fast enough, right? As a nation, as we as taxpayer, we're paying taxes to the government, but if the government moves this slow, we are not working at the most efficient, most streamlined way of how to provide the support, the defense, the needs of our citizens. So the government, through this approach here, they're saying that we want to implement certain new ways of how we buy. So, for example, CSOs. CSOs, as some of you guys are familiar with, is started being utilized in 2017 in terms of test markets. Now, CSO stands for Commercial Solutions Opening, meaning that a contracting officer in agency can go directly to an OEM. OEM stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer. Now, the term OEM says equipment, but equipment could be software, equipment can be hardware, equipment can be any type of service or solutions. We just call it OEM for simplicity. So if the government wants to buy something from an OEM, original equipment manufacturer, they cannot do that because of the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. They have to go through a process to purchase it. And then if the manufacturer, the OEM, did not see the bid, they're not going to bid on it. What CSO allows the government to do is the agency can go directly to the OEM and say, hey, I want to buy this from you. So now it's treated more as a commercial purchase. Instead of using the standard FAR procurement process to where they spend 3-6 months to acquire something, the agency contract officer can go directly to an OEM, say, I want to buy this from you. Let's negotiate price. That is awesome news, right? That's going to create more of a streamlined process. That's going to be better for the manufacturers, the producers. But at the same time, that can impact you as a small business, as a organization. That can hurt you tremendously with this big shift. So the test market was, being done in 2017 under the Trump administration. They're saying we're going to use CSO more now, and this is going to be one of our preferred way of how we purchase from the private sector. So what does that mean for you practically? Lainey, what are your thoughts? If this is CSO is going to be a major shift under cost savings and under efficiency and streamlining, how will this impact small organizations out there?
Yeah, so I think that this is just gonna push the whole I we have this is a huge idea that we talk about with government contractors or GCA, but subcontracting and seeing if you can get in with some of these maybe the larger primes that are going to be doing these contracts or even going straight to someone like a Microsoft or an Adobe and seeing what you can help out with. I think there's also the other side of it that with a contract, maybe Microsoft supplies the 365 or the Office 365, and then a small business comes in for the implementation part of that project. So I think there's two different ways that you can go about it if this is what you're doing and in this type of world.
Yeah, so let's. I'm gonna talk about some practical things that we've seen in the last 3 months or so, when CSOs are started to happen. So, through GSA and through other agencies, they went to. These are examples. They went to Google, and the federal government is standardized on Microsoft SharePoint, which has been the bedrock of email communication and software and ERP solutions for the government. Has been centered around SharePoint, and the government says, you know what, we're going to negotiate with Google for Google Workspace. Now, I've been a Google Workspace user for many years. I like their user experience a lot better than the Microsoft experience, and so I've been, I don't use Outlook, and I have not really touched that much. But the government negotiated directly with Google, and Google said, we're going to give you I think it's 71% discount on Google Workspace. So all of a sudden, Google is paying, or the government is paying, 71% lower than what you and I are paying. And Google Workspace becomes accessible to government agencies now. Federal employees, federal workers can start using that should their agency, their sub agency, or their local office decide to use Google Workspace. And now, in the past, some of you are Google resellers, Google partners. So so what this means is it's a new opportunity for you. And if you have only been using Microsoft as a solution to the government, now all of a sudden, new opportunity falls in front of you. You can actually be a Google partner and sell Google Workspace to government agencies. Now they have different versions of Google Workspace that has to be compliant with FedRAMP and many other different compliance as well. But Google works on the compliance part. Now you get to implement that and you roll that out. So Google is the prime. So no longer do you have a I'm going to sell Microsoft as a prime to the government. I'm going to sell Google as a prime to the government. No, you're going to work with Google because the government is buying it directly with Google, and you're going to be a Google partner, and you're going to be the implementation of Google Workspace to these different agencies. So that's part of the negotiation. That's part of when the governments work directly with manufacturers, then you have to shift your focus of who becomes your target. Google becomes your target because they may get the direct purchase from the government, but Google will still need partners to implement the solution. We've seen that happen with Adobe. We've seen that happen with other Microsoft technology. We've seen that happen with Google in terms of all of these the CSO that's happening right now. So it changes your strategy based upon CSOs and how the government is going to start purchasing certain type of solutions from the private sector.
Yeah, and I want us to dive in. Before we end today, I know we've went through a lot of information. There's way more we can go through, but one specific is the new executive orders on GSA. So you touched on GSA a little bit. I'm gonna read the executive order so that we will have. So it is eliminating waste and saving taxpayer dollars by consolidating procurement. And that it's including the mandates of consolidation of common goods and services buying under the General Services Administration, which is GSA. And then instructs agencies to leverage GSA contracts for standard purchases, so increase those contracts, eliminating duplication and promoting economies of scale. And so, Abe, as you know, currently GSA is managing about $94 billion in contracts. They are saying that there is a potential that GSA could have an increase to $400 billion being managed through GSA schedules and contracting vehicles. So that is an insane increase. So let's talk about some just practical ways as a small business, if you already aren't familiar with GCA schedules and contracting vehicles, what that could look like moving forward to get into that, get a little piece of the pie.
Yeah, different agencies have different contracting vehicles. So, for example, you have Seaport, you have NetCent, you
Mhm.
have ITES, you have, Oasis. You have all these different contracting vehicles out there that, NASA suit, right? Another major one. And they purchase very overlapping solutions and technologies and products and items out there. It doesn't make sense. So, as much I like the fact that different agencies have contracting vehicles, I think that's healthier for the small business community. But it also makes sense as from a government perspective. So let me share my opinion. I like it where different agencies have different contracting vehicles. I think there's more opportunities for you as a organization because you can get this contracting vehicle and you can nurture that and build relationship and get win contracts through that agency. But through consolidation, it makes sense from a economics perspective. It makes sense from a tax savings perspective. It makes sense from reducing costs and purchasing more volume. So I think practically as a nation, it makes sense, but as it makes sense for small, I don't think it makes sense for small businesses. So I think the consolidation will hurt small businesses. So with some practical example here. First, I don't believe that GSA is going to manage $400 billion worth of contract when it's all said and done. One is GSA have had their employees reduced. They supposedly bring AI to help out with some of the acquisition processes. And yes, that will help to some degree. But GSA as it is have never been as efficient as it needs to be. There's been gaps at GSA. And so I don't think GSA will ever manage $400 billion of what the potential expectation will be. But I do believe that with consolidation, GSA's influence in the government market will increase. Now, maybe not to 400 billion, but maybe to 150 billion, maybe to 200 billion in terms of total contract management. GSA is kind of like a private organization. Yes, they're government, but they're like the IRS. They're not fully federal. They're not fully private sector. They're pseudo government organization, and although they're governed by and they're overseen through Congress and through different organizations out there. But I believe that GSA um, will become more efficient over time, but a GSA contracting officer will not treat you the same way as a contracting officer that's tied with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, that person, they understand the specific needs of their agency, the specific
Yeah.
challenges. Uh, a GSA, they're just paper pusher. They understand the rules, the acquisition regulations, and they're going to say, okay, this is what we're looking for. These are the companies that we're evaluating, and they're not evaluating more so from the fit perspective. They're evaluating from do they meet the requirements perspective, and requirements potentially could be technical requirements, but a lot of it is going to be more did they give us A, B, C, D, E, F? And yes, they did. And is the price better or the price not? And so I think there's some real danger in terms of some of the shift in terms of reducing costs. 60% of federal contracts have been awarded based on best value. We've learned over the years that lowest price is not the best solution. Why? If you're sending people to Mars, NASA is not going
Yeah.
to look for the cheapest, you know,
Spaceship.
spaceship. They're not going to look for the cheapest metal. They're not going to look for the cheapest nuts and
Yeah.
bolts, right? If you're building missile defense, you're not looking for the cheapest. You're looking for the best. You cannot have mission failure, and so we learned that over the years, and I think we're gonna relearn that lesson because now we're shifting to more lowest cost, lowest price. Um, I think that's gonna be expensive lessons as we make some of these changes.
Well, and I think that's interesting too. I don't know if you've ever read any of Trump's book, specifically. I think this specific story is in The Art of the Deal. He talks about building Trump Tower and a lot of the hotels and stuff. And if you've ever visited any of those places, those are not built on cheapest way to build stuff. I mean, they have he talks about going to the marble quarries, picking out entire marble walls, like insane stuff. I get that was a business deal, he had to you have to pay the money to make the money. I understand it's different. But at the same time, I think he does understand that because of his background. And so it's don't learn this lesson the hard way of when stuff fails, when you get the lowest price and somebody's never done the job that needs to be done, and all the things that can come from it. As somebody who is in real estate and my husband's in construction, I see this all the time, and it does not turn out good if you have not seen this. So, interesting to see what will be the final outcome of some of those GSA initiatives.
Yeah. So practically, what does that mean for you as an organization? Here's what it means. One is if you don't have a GSA a GSA schedule right now, you have to get one.
Yeah.
You will not survive or you will not grow. Maybe you might survive, but you will not grow the way you want to grow if you are not on one of the GSA contracting vehicle, whether it's a big GWAC contract or whether it's the Oasis or whether it's Stars 3 or Future Stars 4 or whether it's just a standard GSA mass multiple award schedule. If you do not have that, you will start to see that you're getting squeezed out of future opportunities. Now, these contracting vehicles, there's going to be thousands of people on some of these contracting vehicles. In the past, it might be 30 companies, it might be 100, But some of these contracted vehicles that GSA is going to be managing, it's going to have thousands, of companies on there, and so you're still competing against other businesses. But if you don't have these vehicles, you won't even be able to compete in the future. So you have to get on GSA. If you need more help with GSA, we do have a support system in place for that. So reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to guide you through the GSA schedule process and the qualification for that there. So just let us know. With that, that is the big shift. Now, one last few comments outside of GSA. Uh, we talked about CSOs earlier in terms of commercial solutions openings. Another big shift that's going to happen is OTA, other transaction authority. OTA also has another acronym, other transaction agreements. This is another big shift that has nothing to do with GSA, but it has everything to do with how you approach government contracting. OTA, we're going to dive deeper into OTA in a different session, but I'll give you a quick summary today. This is happening as we speak right now. In the previous years, OTAs, few $1 billion, but now is getting to the billions of dollars. Is going to I think last year it was over $20 billion using OTAs. I believe that this is going to probably reach over $100 billion in usage of OTAs. So what is OTA? OTA is for emerging technology or new innovation, and it's treated as a commercial purchase. The government can negotiate directly with you if you have something new, something innovative that's going to solve a pain point for the agency. Now, I'm not talking about I have janitorial services and I'm going to use OTA as a contracted vehicle. That's not what we're talking about. If you have a new technology, new prototype, new innovation that you feel is a fit to a pain point that the government have, you can join a consortium of and then that consortium will be your voice to a specific agency. And through OTA, you can receive a $50 million sole source contract for your technology, for your solutions in 90 days, and there's no protests through OTAs. If your technology or your solution, you can get a sole source contract up to $500 million over time as you create a prototype and then you start to roll out a solution up to $500 million sole source to your technology, to your solutions. So pay attention to some of these shifts that's happening. It matters to you. You will get left behind if you're not paying attention. So all of you who are joining us or who's watching this here on replay, you are ahead of the curve because now you're starting to say, okay, I need to pay attention to CSO. I need to get on GSA. I need to get OTAs and understand some of these new contracting vehicles that's going to be available for you as the market continues to shift and evolve.
Yeah, so I want to mention next week's episode right quick. I'm putting the link in the chat. We have a special guest, Dr. Tanya Thornton, who is the Vice President of Research and Development at the Global Connective Center, and she is a nationally recognized expert in critical infrastructure and emergency management. She also was honored as top 40 under 40 um, for International Association of Emergency Managers. So she's amazing. We have so much to learn from her. And we're going to be talking about unlocking multi sector success next week. So I'm really excited to have her on and really excited for y'all to be able to come back and join in and just learn about her. And she's had so many experiences from her time in government contracting, different sectors. She's been, commercial sector, education sector, military. She has a lot of great advice to bring for us.
Well, with that said, we are at the end of today's Grants and Contract podcast. It's powered by the Gov Association or the Government Contractors Association. If you're not part of the GovCon community yet, govcon.community, come on there. We have news, we have free content, free resources. And if you want to be a part of it, the subscription is really affordable for unlocking other resources on there. So lots of free tools and then also a lot of added tools and resources there. So come and hang out with us at the govcon.community and we will see you there for some of you.
See you there, and remember, we will see you next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And remember, you are only one grant away.
And one contract away from all your goals, the dreams that you have for the next employee, the next car you want, and for the next chapter of what you want to do in your business.
Yes. All right. See you next week. Thank you for joining. Bye
Take
bye,
care, buddy.
everyone.